Welcome to ArtSpeak University. I'm Kirk.
And I'm Jason. Today we're talking about how to set goals that actually get done. And so glad that you were able to log in. I tell you what, I know there's some chat already happening. I can see it. It might be out of my reach to read it, but there are some art speakers in there ready to connect and meet. And at the end of this, we're going to also open up to some Q&A. So, but go ahead and drop in there. Where are you from? What role you have in on the planet? What your job is here, and what you love doing, and how you connected with us. Whatever you'd like to share, drop it there because we'd love to interact and even hear your questions as we get going. But it's a brand new year, Kirk. It is time for New Year's resolutions.
It is, and hopefully you figured yours out yet, because the deadline was a week ago.
You missed it. I will say this though. I will say that this is also the time of year where people over spiritualize and decommission New Year's resolutions. And I am a fan. Okay. So I'm a fan of any time it can feel like a new day. Anytime it can feel like a new week, a new year. And there's these moments where we as humans are like, you know what? I am going to start a new habit. I think it's easier when we think it's a new chapter, a new day, a new season, and the new year is a great time for that. So I see a lot of people post it. I mean, it took about 30 minutes before I into the new year when I saw somebody posting these huge rants about you don't need a word for the year. You have all the words of the Bible. And I was like, geez, narrow that down, So, but like throwing the New Year's resolutions under the bus.
Well, I think there's this pushback to it, maybe because people have had this experience where they went into a new year, set a bunch of big goals, and maybe they didn't happen the way that they had hoped.
That's fair. And I will say this, full confession, and maybe you're like this too. Christmas is not a break. The holidays is not a time off. In fact, for me, in my house, we've got like Christmas, our anniversary, 20 years. We've been married 20 years. It's awesome. And then my wife's birthday, and we've got her grandma who just turned 96 last week, and all within 2 weeks, we have major family birthdays. Obviously, Christmas is a big deal. Anniversary is a big deal. It's all packed in there. Plus, the kids are out of school, and you're doing a lot of activities. And we're a basketball family because it's the greatest sport. But we would be anyway. But we're a basketball family, so this is the middle of the season. It's a busy time.
And so I think if the holidays for you are in fact a break, where you feel like you get to step back from normal life and you have some moments to breathe and you can kind of get that 30,000 foot view of your life or this year, and we're also speaking to organizational leaders here. If you're looking at your organization, what's going to happen this year? If you've had that chance to step back and then feel like you saw the big picture, well, then you may have had time to set those goals in a healthy way. But if not, then maybe that's the first task here, is to create that space, ask the right questions, and figure out what are the right goals for me, for my organization this year.
Absolutely. We give you permission if you miss the New Year deadline to make February 1st your new year. All right. That's what I'm doing. In fact, I don't really get specific with the goals until about right now. So how do you set the right goal, right? You're going to cast vision. You're going to cast vision for your organization. You're going to cast vision for your life. Part of that is setting the right goal. Here, step one, guess. Guess, start somewhere, and then get better and better at predicting future success for yourself, for others. There's a book called Predictable Success. Huge fan. I'm going to drop several books that play into my philosophy of this conversation as we go through today. Number one, Les McCown, Predictable Success. Talking about organizationally, being able to predict. What is predictable success? It's saying, I think this might happen in the future, and then that actually happening. You're able to say, I think we could set this goal, and it actually occurs. You get better and better at that. No, I don't think anyone's naturally good at that. No organization, especially one that's scaling, he talks about that. You need great systems. You need great focus. That's a great book to talk about that. But go ahead, guess at what might be a great goal. Get started somewhere, and then you get better and better at doing that. But I love this second part of just, it's not just setting the right goal, but it's also measuring that goal. Make the goal measurable.
If it's going to motivate you, and if you're going to be able to, at the end of this time frame, be able to say, yes, it happened, or no, it didn't, then you have to be able to measure it in some way. And part of the keys that we're going to get into later is you want to be able to measure some progress towards this goal, because it's not, these big goals, they're not things that happen overnight. And so you're going to have to find some ways, figure out some ways that you could measure this thing that you want to happen.
And it doesn't, and there's a thing, lag measures versus lead measures. A lag measure, like, well, at the end of this year, I want this much money in the bank account. Okay, great. How much money in your bank account? Probably a good thing to keep your eye on, good thing to measure. But once it's there, like, what got it there, right? That would be lead measurements. And we're going to talk more about how to break your goals and how to think in reverse and create some goals within those goals. All of those making it measurable. I love that. I think that's an advantage of competitive sports, right? It's it's very clear. There's a scoreboard. Get more of those, do more of that. And then the team will break down stats. Hey, if we do less of these, we might get more of those. If we do more of these, we would also get more of those. So, they measure everything. But not all of life is that way, And so if you're trying to be in great shape, you could look at pounds. Again, that would be a lag measure, but you could look at pounds, but you could also look at flexibility and how often and consistency. And I want to talk in this whole conversation about personal and corporate, because I think the principles are going to apply back and forth. But I think at the end of the day, consistency is going to trump intensity every time. You're right. I stole it from like Aesop's so Aesop is the one who actually wrote that. When he talked about, a turtle being able to outrun a rabbit, right? So, but your consistency, but figure out the things to measure. But even more important is make it important. More important than what you're measuring is make your goal important to you and important to those that you're leading.
Because if it's not actually important to you, to your life, if it's not important to your organization, and if the people in your organization don't know that it's important, then it will not happen. It will not. And so I think there's a fundamental question that you have to ask first, even before you're thinking about what goals do I want to set. The bigger question is, what do I want?
It's very foundational. It's one of the three questions that that revolutionized my life, changed my life every time I ask it. It's actually a question that I stole from Jesus. I'm sure you've asked it before, but what do I want? It's what he asks at least two different occasions. What do you want? And I know sometimes those of you that are of faith and followers of Jesus, you'll be like, oh God, what do you want for my life? That's merited. Great. I surrender whatever you want, God. What if he's like, I don't know. What do you want to do? And what if we go and do that together? And while we do it, let's make disciples while you go and do that thing. But so what do you want? What do you want? And this little foreshadowing at the end of this webinar, where there's going to be a little bit of homework, and it's going to be centered right around this question. What do you want? And so, but make it light. What we're trying to say at the top here is when you're casting vision, that you need to set the right goals. When you're casting vision, whether you're leading yourself, you're leading your family, you're leading your team, you're leading an entire organization, set the right goal, make those goals measurable, and make them important, like life purpose important, right? Not just like, oh man, this feels important, but like it motivates me to do this. Like at the end of the week, at the end of the next year, at the end of this year, I'll be able to say, man, we did that. We moved the needle on that.
Yeah, and you have to be able to connect that dot for everybody that you're leading here, so that they know why it's important in general why it's important to them personally. because if you can't connect those dots, I'm like, okay, well, that's great. That's a big goal for the organization. If you're leading a business and you have a revenue goal, that may not mean anything to somebody working in your organization unless you can connect the dots. And what does it mean for them? Why is it important for them? If it's a church, and why is this important to someone working in a volunteer on your greeting team? Why is it important to them? Why does it matter?
I love that. And so let's cast vision, like, right? The people perish without a vision. I like the translation that says, the people cast off restraint. People are going all kinds of directions. Your family, your company, your team. If you don't have very clear vision, so set a goal, set the right goal, make it measurable, and then also make it very important to you and to those that you lead. Also make it actionable, right? So cast vision, make it actionable. This is where we're going to take our goals. And this is where this is the title, right? How to set goals that actually get done. That's what we want to focus on, not just dream big. I'm a dreamer, but I want to be a doer. I don't want to wait till someday. I want to get the work done today. How? I've got to turn it into action. I've got to take my words and then get to work. And so how do we turn it into action? Here's a trick. My wife taught me this years ago when we were first married. I was more of the free spirit, right? And so we had to be somewhere later in the day, and I'm the one who's late, right? I know that's reversed in other marriages or on sitcoms anyway, right? The woman's always the last one ready. It was me, all right? I'm the one who wasn't ready. I didn't get all the things done because I didn't do this one thing, and that's work backwards. I didn't plan in reverse. If I have this commitment at 5 p.m., then it's going to take me 30. And some of you are like, this guy's a mess. Like, who doesn't do that? Nobody professional doesn't do that. That's why we're saying this. But if you're like, hear me out, it can be in a day where you plan your day in reverse so that you can fulfill the commitments and the promise you made, but can also be in the week, in the month, in the year, specifically for your goals. And hopefully those are rooted in something very important to what you want.
I mean, to play that out, for example, I see in the chat, in fact, we've got a lot of runners this year. I'm a runner. For years I have said, yeah, I think I want to run a marathon this year. Guess what? It's never happened yet. Now this year I made a commitment. I'm signed up for one. There's one happening. So now I'm set on it. But I know that I can't just show up on race day and think I'm going to run a whole marathon. In fact, there's any number of plans out there that you can go find and follow that say, okay, if you're going to run a marathon X months out, then this week you need to run this many miles. You need to do these runs. And so you have a plan then that works backwards so that you can build up to what you need to be when you're ready to actually do the thing. But that also works no matter what kind of goal you're setting. In fact, it's essential. It's essential because if it's a goal that matters, it's probably going to have multiple steps to it. It's not magic.
It's not magic. And I think that especially those of us, full confession, that are involved in ministry, I know we serve a lot of great churches, a lot of great ministries, but some ministries, some mindsets, we're just kind of sitting around waiting for magic to happen, right? Like maybe this is the year that magic happens. Then we don't use the word magic. In fact, some of you are uncomfortable at hearing me use the word magic so many times in a row. So here's what I mean. We're just sitting around waiting for God to do something that what if he's given us the responsibility to do, right? Like we want to we want to serve more. We want to reach more. We want to connect more. What we're saying is, what if it boiled down to a habit, a goal that you put down and began to reverse engineer and created tasks, turning it into action steps that you could do each and every week rather than just waiting for. One of those action steps would be to create subtasks, right? Because now you have a big task, you got a big goal, you got to break it into steps.
And so, I mean, you can look at any number of resources out there that could help you as an organization do this. And we look at resources called Traction.
Gino
Wickman. As an organization, if we set some big goals for the year, and then to follow that process, we then have to break it down and have some goals, some priorities for each quarter. so that we know that we're going to be on track, that this quarter we got to accomplish these things so that the next quarter we can accomplish some more things, and so on, so that at the end of the year we get to where we wanted to go. And that comes from working backwards. Like, okay, if we're going to see the kind of growth, that we have some growth targets we want to see, all right, what kind of company do we have to become in order for that to happen? What kind of habits do we have to get to so that that kind of growth is occurring?
And so we said, Gino in the book Traction, and it's called the Entrepreneur Operating System, the whole thing that he teaches. We're big fans. We've helped coach organizations, both small, medium, and very large, in implementing similar structure into and habits and rhythms into their organizations. One of the big metaphors, and you guys will catch this, it's the big rocks that each quarter, each month, we're setting. Here's the big things we're going to do. And I saw somebody in the chat mentioning being overly optimistic about all that you can do in a given amount of time. As an individual, I relate. Okay. Kirk's laughing because he's been partnered up with me. That's me. Okay. And but what that discipline organizationally has taught me is you only get 2 or 3 of those major focuses in a month or 3-month period. So pick them, choose them well, like, because you have a really great goal. You've got some clarity around it. Now you're going to break it down into sub goals. Make sure those sub goals are pushing towards the big goal. Not just getting you off track. And that does create a very realistic timeline into what you can do. Now, are you always going to hit it? No, you're not. But you can get better and better, right? You're guessing, you're getting started somewhere, and then you're going to get better and better at setting those.
Part of that realistic timeline, I think, is also about being realistic with the resources that you have, being realistic with your team. We're huge on culture and having a healthy culture. And sometimes it may feel like having big goals and having a healthy culture are at odds with each other. I don't think that's true. But it does mean, to Jason's point, with the big rocks metaphor is like you've got a jar and you've got sand and you've got rocks. You put the sand in first, you're not going to get all the rocks in, right? You know that metaphor. It means that you're going to have to say no to some things in order to say yes to these goals that you're going to hit.
Well, it also, you realize by thinking about it this way, that everything you say yes to, it doesn't have to be one of your goals, but it does mean you're saying no to something else. It makes you count the opportunity cost, which is something that those that are overly optimistic, like myself, naturally, we don't want to do. We kind of want to leave that to the magic, right? Like it'll just happen. And speaking of just, I see somebody else, Uriah's mentioning writing a book with his wife. Phenomenal idea. I think you guys should do it. I think it would be great. Tell the stories, just something about chickens, at least in one chapter should be in there. But write that children's book, but just leaving that to, it'll happen. We'd like to do that. That's in dreamland. And I live in dreamland. I have a mug that says dreamer on it at home, right? But I want to be a doer this year. So I have got to put it on the calendar. I've got to take it, making it actionable. I've got to work backwards. I've got to create those sub goals and break it down, realistic timeline. I've got to make sure that everyone has a role, right? If you're doing this in a partnership with your wife, right, then she's going to have a role. What is her role? What is your role? Kirk, what your role? My role. We all have team. We now have a team of, I think right around 40 creatives. So everybody's got a role to play. We're not just showing up and guessing, right? Like there's some management to this. Everyone has a role to play.
Well, essentially, if we're the part of the point here of breaking it down and getting really specific on what are all the things that have to happen in order for this big goal to happen, means that you're also bringing more people into the picture. Now, maybe we're talking about beyond your personal goals. Now we're talking about an organizational goal. If that organization is going to accomplish that goal, and if it really is important, if it really is life purpose important, you're going to get everybody involved. And you need to connect the dots between, we have this big goal, here's why it matters, here's all the things that are going to have to happen for that to happen. And look, you have a role to play. If you're a church and you're looking to, maybe you set a goal for, hey, we've got this discipleship pipeline and we want to double it this year. We want twice as many people going through that discipleship pipeline. And you're figuring out what all has to happen in order for that goal to happen. Well, now you've got things that, hey, to go back to that greeter. Hey, greeter, in order to see this, you know what has to happen? We need everybody to come in feeling as welcome as they just showed up at grandma's house. Can you help us with that? You might find ways to measure that so that they can be like, all right, yeah, awesome, we're winning, so that they have a sense of progress and momentum in this progression here that you're leading them through.
You mentioned momentum. I think that would be the next big step, is we have to keep the momentum building, keep building momentum, right? If you've ever been in the sports or even tangent to the sports world, or been to a sports game, there's moments where all of a sudden one team just has the momentum and they're going on a run, they're going on a streak. It's the same works for life, same works for business. Like, you get into a momentum of success. And it can start small, which is the beauty of setting these measurable, actionable steps, because then you get one and it feels like a win, and you do another one. And now it feels like you're moving on goals, because you're achieving goals makes you want to achieve some more goals. And instead of just setting this one big goal that we dream about, we actually have the opportunity to set some little goals in between that build momentum. And here's the biggest step to building momentum: weekly habits and rhythms. Find your rhythm. What are your weekly habits? Until it's a part of your daily schedule, it's not really a part of your life.
I love that.
Yeah, I probably stole it from somebody smarter than me, but one book that I read, I was probably about a year ago, Carey Nieuwhof's "Do Your Best When You're at Your Best." That speaks about not just getting it on the calendar, not just blocking time, but do the things that you're best at when you're at your best. The thing that brings the most value to your career, to your future, to these goals, to your organization, put that when you're at your best. Well, when are you at your best? Well, you can say, well, I'm always at my best. I'm not always at my best. You're not, okay? You're not. We have hunger, we have exhaustion. Usually, and Carey talks about this in his book, about a 2.5, most of us an hour and a half, some 2.5 hour window of the day. And it might be morning, it might be afternoon, it might be evening, but where you're just, man, you can get more realistic. Like, I have a hard time setting goals. Well, you're good at getting things done in that 2-hour block. So for me, that's usually about 9:30 to 11:30. Right? It's or 9 to 11, 9 to 11:30. It's that mid to late morning for me, right? The caffeine is kicked in. That's probably a popular time. I don't know if I'm normal, but that caffeine is kicked in, but and breakfast has got the protein going. I've already finished my morning routine. Now I sit down, I've filed through some of the fog of getting started, and now I can hit a pace and I can get more done in that 2-hour window than any other 2-hour window for the rest of the day. Then I get hungry, eat, and then head into the afternoon, try to hit up some more caffeine. There's ways to trigger, and probably another smaller window in the afternoon of some increased productivity. But how can I do some leverage that time in the morning to get the most done?
Some of you, maybe you focus is your superpower. I envy you. It's not mine. And so I have to be intentional about my focus. I have to plan ahead, because, like, to Jared's point in the chat here, that sand, it's coming. The sand is coming to fill the jar, fill the jar of your time, your day, your attention. And so if you have not preemptively put in the priorities, we use Google Calendar. So I block it out. I put in, this is what I'm working on at this time of day ahead of time. So I know when someone's like, hey, can we meet right now? No, but we can meet later, because right now I'm working on this. And that's the only way I'm going to be able to be intentional about that time, rather than reactive, proactive versus reactive. Because that's what it's going to take. If you're going to accomplish something different this year than you did last year, then it probably means you're going to have to rearrange your schedule differently this year than you did last year.
That's good. That's real good. And I'm going to end with this. It'll be a life hack / homework assignment right at the very end. But keep the goal, the habits, and your gratitudes in front of you daily. We're going to come back to that in just a second. But that's all about weekly habits and rhythms and how to build momentum. And then you just got to keep measuring and keep tracking that progress.
So yeah, as you measure, you want to find something that you could measure weekly. Some things aren't that way. Some things don't lend themselves to being tracked weekly, but usually there's something, a lead measure rather than a lag measure, perhaps, that says we're doing the right things that we need to do in order to head the direction that we want to go. And then look at that, keep that in front of yourself and in front of your team every week. Because this is the key point, especially for organizations. If you've set goals for your organization in the past and found that several months later, no one even remembered what the goals were. Anybody? It's because it wasn't kept in front of the team consistently. And so you got to keep talking about it. You got to keep measuring it. And you got to keep reiterating that over and over again.
Well, yeah, and Patrick Lencioni wrote a book called The Advantage, and really he's got four. If you want an advantage in business, he has 4 steps, and that's build a cohesive leadership team. Boy, there's a whole nother webinar we could talk about that, because we are, and I'll just say I'm just so grateful for the leaders that we have at ArtSpeak and the team that we have at ArtSpeak and the cohesion, not perfection, but man, you want a cohesive team. So build that team. 2, create clarity. Then he says the 3rd step is communicate the clarity. And the 4th step is over communicate the clarity, that says that communicating the clarity becomes very, very important piece of this, and over communicating it. Find another book, Boundaries for Leaders by Dr. Henry Cloud, talks about the executive functions of the human brain is the same as the executive functions of a team. And the brain does 3 things, according to Dr. Cloud. It focuses, right? The reticular activator. Kirk, you got a great teaching on that. And this is what I like. This is the focus. It also prohibits. These are things that we don't do here. We don't do it. Don't touch, right? Your brain will help you with that. And then it remembers. It reminds and remembers what our focus is and what we avoid. And as a leader for your own life, as a leader for your family, as a leader in your community, as a leader in an organization, set the focus, communicate that, right? And then set the prohibitions. But then also, you're the memory. Your job is to remind and look for as many ways as possible to do that.
This year, I just rearranged my office, which I don't know. That might be a great habit to do, like during the holidays every year, because I feel painful. A fresh life in my office. But one of the things I've done, I hung a whiteboard up on the wall, just from where I sit at my desk. It's just above my main screen, and the only thing that goes on that whiteboard are my goals and things that I'm focused on right now. And that way, at all points during the day, I can look up, what am I focused on right now? There it is. And to remind me my daily habits, make sure I'm doing those, because I know there's some things that I am better and I will accomplish more if I just remember to do these things, like start with gratitude and drink water and seek the clarity, things like that help keep me focused and on track throughout my day, but also pointed at my main goals.
I love that. And we have some tools organizationally that we lean into, like Slack for communication, Asana for task management, Google Drive for file sharing. That helps us all keep information and keep conversations in front of us. But as leadership, both ourselves leading meetings, we're keeping those things. We got to keep talking about the goals. You have to keep talking about where you're at, what we're doing to move the needle, what we're doing to put points on the board, weekly, monthly, quarterly, measuring, tracking progress. This is where we're headed. And here's how we're going to get there. And some of those, here's how we're going to get there, if you're a part of a team, doesn't always have to come from you. If you've got compelling vision, that is life-changing, compelling vision, like this is important to the team, then you're going to have other people that are going to help you come up with the solutions on how to get there. So you don't have to have all of the answers.
Thank goodness.
In fact, I hope you have some questions. We want to jump to Q&A, but before I do that, I want to give you one life hack. We're going to jump to Q&A. It's a note in my phone that has both my goals, it has my gratitudes, and I think that gratitudes is the perfect place to keep your goals. right next to your gratitudes,
Hmm.
because I can say, this is the me I want to be. This is what I want to go and do. And this is what I want to grow. But I'm so grateful for where I'm at. I'm grateful for what I have, but I feel called and compelled to move forward towards this. I think goals and gratitudes are siblings, and they should stay together. So I put them in a note in my phone, and then I review it every day, and I add to it and I tweak it. That keeps it at the top of the note. And then it gets better. Over years now, it has turned into a personal confession. This is the Jason wants to be. And I promise you, I can be sitting in a parking lot when it's dark and it's cold, and I would rather drive home than walk through the cold. I might be describing this morning, okay? I'm at the gym and it's icy and cold, and I can read that confession. And then I will get out of the car with more momentum and more energy for my own personal life, and then go into a day of meetings with the enthusiasm that I want to lead with. Why? Because I've just, like your vision board, your dry erase board in front of you for tasks during the day, I'm also setting a larger meta narrative for myself, saying this is the me I want to be.
That's awesome.
You can just start. It's your words and it's your confession. It's your life. You can live it however you want. You just only get to live it once. So I just recommend, let's make the most of today. Let's make the most of it. Let's jump into these questions.
Yeah, well, we got some great questions here. We'll just jump right in. What obstacles have we seen prevent teams from catching on to goals?
Oh man. Well, let me answer it how I was thinking, and then if I'm missing it at all, looks like that's from Andrew. I think one thing, sometimes we get so, like, we're such an achievement culture, right? Because we're in the West and capitalism, and I'm a fan, all right? But I think sometimes, I remember Dave Ramsey on one of his podcasts was talking about in year 2, they set a big goal to sell $500,000 worth of Financial Peace University, but they only sold 400,000. And so the next year they're like, let's sell 1 million. But they didn't hit it either. They only sold 850,000. And then the next year, like, well, let's set a big goal of 2 million. But they fell short again at 1.6. And then they said, well, let's set a bigger goal of 4 million. And they fell short at 3.3. You see the trend here is they were on this like 50%, they were growing by 100% a year for years, even though they didn't attain their goals. Now, I think we can look back sometimes and we can set predictable success goals. But I think we should also give ourselves a pretty good measure of grace. What if the journey of learning how to apply those goals and set those goals and turn it into action is actually the goal? The growth that you get from working towards a goal is better than achieving the goal even.
You know, it makes me think of James Clear in Atomic Habits, where he talks about, this is really, if you want to get down to the core of it, it's not about a specific thing you accomplish. It's about who you want to be.
That's it.
And how every time you do a habit, you start reinforcing a habit, you are making a vote for the person that you want to be or the organization that you want to be. And so I think there's value. Obviously, we're talking about it to set that big goal, and that was going to be measurable. But we can celebrate throughout the whole process. The goal of this measuring that we're talking about every week and this check-in and keeping it in front of people is not to say, come on, people, work harder. It's to celebrate the progress, to say that, yeah, we're doing it. We're being the organization we want to be, and that's going to bring us where we want to go. So I think celebrating the whole way through, and maybe that's what you're talking about, is celebrating versus grading or
oh, for sure. I mean, let's not weaponize our goals, which leads us right into a question. How do you get momentum for an organizational goal when your team already has so much on their plate? And I hope you hear us talking about this in both personal goals and organizational goals at the same time, because I think the principles are interchangeable. But I would hope that you as a leader within your organization, whether the organization is or not, understands that when you're healthy, when your team is healthy, when you're at your best, when your team's at your best, you get their best. If the team is feeling at their best, then they're at their best. So maybe how do you get momentum around an organizational goal? If the goal is more salt out of the salt mine? I don't know when salt mining was a big deal, but like it's pretty difficult apparently. But when that was going on, like, and if people were like taskmasters, then yeah, you're already burned out. But what if the organizational goal was, hey, let's get ourselves healthy? A lot of times when there's too much on the plate, maybe things need to be reorganized. Maybe there's let's get more efficient. Let's build some systems. Let's build some strategies let's schedule our day. I've met teams that, and done a lot of consulting by now, and I've met teams that were at bandwidth that today, a year later, I've got one client in mind, a year later, they have half the team, more profit, and way more happiness. So, and they're all still busy, but they actually enjoy their life better. So what if it is about finding the habit and the rhythm more than just get more done?
Well, I think, part of the answer there is certainly when you say yes to this over here, you're saying no to something else, and vice versa. And so if you've got team members that are already too much on their plate, then part of the answer is, okay, and you can work this out with your team as you set these goals. It's like, okay, if the team's on board, your leaders are on board with hitting a certain goal, part of that discussion might be, okay, what are we not doing this year then? What's, and that doesn't have to be a flat out no, but maybe we're not doing that this year. We're doing that next year. If you're a church and you've always done one big event in the summer and then another big one in the fall, well, maybe you're picking one or the other this year. And I think that's one part of the answer. I think the other thought that I have here is that you only get to lead people as long as you're leading them where they want to go.
That's good.
So have you figured out with your team, what are their goals? This big goal that you're setting for their organization, does their goal fit inside of that? Are those compatible goals? If not, you're eventually going to lose them. But if they're saying, yeah, my life purpose aligns with what you're talking about here, that energizes me, that gives me life, then you have something to work with there. Like, yeah, okay, they're going to be on board as long as you're not also asking them to sacrifice other things that are definitely part of their goals. Like, I want to spend some time with my family and I want to sleep at night. So,
I wonder if that answers some of this next question. What are some ways you help detail-oriented team members get on board with big goals? I think you've got to set. I would love to. That was from Andrew. I'd love to hear Andrew respond to that. I would ask that same question, and we can have those conversations in our online community for creatives. Like, shameless plug here, if you're not already, many of you are, but if you're not already a part of the church, give me the website.
ArtSpeak Creative Community. You can find it from our homepage.
Yeah, you can go to artspeakcreative.com, but the ArtSpeak Creative Community is for creatives like you that want to lead themselves well, but also want to help create and fashion themselves as a creative. We talk about these tensions a lot. We can have more dialogue. That question actually makes me wish we were in a full-on Zoom call, and I would just throw that one right back to the team, right? Because I'm kind of the dreamer, big goal setter, less than detail oriented. But boy, has my life elevated by partnering with detail-oriented people. So I think I'd like to think that I would defer and also try to answer the difficult questions. Usually detail-oriented people, when they're asking questions about a big goal, it's not because they don't want, in my experience, it's not because they don't want the big goal to happen. It's just they want to see how can it happen? How can I help make it happen? Which goes back to everything we've been talking about, is these are ways that you've got to be able to cast vision and hand it off by answering some of those detailed questions. Here are the pieces. But it might mean we're going to prioritize. Even if we don't say no to this thing that we used to do, it's okay if it comes last. And because this is going to be the new goal, because it aligns with what that person cares about and aims at, and sees how, boy, if the whole organization can hit that, we all can have more of what we want. And that's not just revenue, but it can also be fulfillment and influence and opportunity, and hopefully a culture that achieves great things, but not at the expense of health.
Yeah, and that process is going to take time. With our team, you're not going to get the projects done. You're not going to get the goals done if you don't have the detail-oriented people. But to get them on board, you're going to have to make the time to have the conversations, to seek the clarity that's needed in order to flesh out those details.
Yeah. Another question from Jeremy: how many goals do you recommend someone tackle at a time? Boy, that's a good one. Less is probably more. I think like Craig Groeschel said one time, he only focuses on one new life habit at a time.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's smart. I think sometimes, though, you can dial in on a cornerstone habit, right? Is that Atomic Habits? Where did I steal that phrase? Or is that Duhigg?
There's Duhigg.
The Power of Habit, by Charles Duhigg. You can stumble in on a cornerstone habit by doing this one thing. For me, it's personal habit. It's athletic exercise. It's doing something physical. If I do that, I'm more likely to be spiritually disciplined. I'm more likely to read. I'm more likely to get through my other tasks, just the way I'm wired. Maybe you are too. But so you can create one that then has a domino effect into others. But I would focus on one big goal at a time. Again, we as an organization then break some of our annual goals, really focus on, sometimes it's like 3 big rocks. We have teams and teams working on putting 3, usually 2 to 3 at the most, 4 big projects in play at one time. And then what do you do if a team's falling short on that goal? Other corporal punishment. What would you do? How do you balance empathy with inspirational urgency? I think empathy is always going to be the play for leadership. Empathetic honesty is a core value. So we're going to be honest, but we're also going to be listeners, right? So if there's an individual or a team that's shirking responsibility and they're not following through on agreed upon practices and that make everyone healthier and communicate well, and they're not showing up and they're not producing, then we have to figure out something else. That's honesty. You can't, but we can also listen and try our best to understand what's going on that's keeping you from what we all talked about us all doing together. And they may have a very legitimate hurdle that now the whole team says, hey, next quarter, we've all got to focus on removing that hurdle. Otherwise, none of us can run this race. And I think that's where you have to listen first, but also, and there might be some inspirational urgency. Sometimes there's an event, there's a deadline, there's a calendar, and that might mean if there's an obstacle or a hurdle that emerges or the timeline itself is short enough, where you just have to readjust. And as a leader, if you're a leader, please hear me. We have to be willing to readjust our expectations on what could be delivered in that time, given that new information and circumstance. So many great questions.
And the science behind the attitude of gratitude. I mean, we talk about this a lot.
Somebody knows Kirk. They teed him up for that one.
Oh, man. And that's a whole other talk. But I will say it is proven that if you practice gratitude personally, and even better as a team, you will increase your own creativity. You'll increase your own energy. You unlock your areas of your brain. You help move yourself from a restricted set of options to more options. So it's a powerful practice. We start every meeting by sharing gratitude for one another, for puppies, for whatever. It doesn't matter, but that sets us in the right mindset to be creative and find solutions to problems.
Yeah, and I think some of the science we've taught on that, Kirk, there was a study that you introduced us to that said that there is an awesome dopamine release, right? There's endorphins released when publicly somebody is praised. But what they found was the person who did the praising had the same experience in their brain as the person who was praised. Well, so that's cool. But then the real surprise was that everyone who heard that happen live also had the same thing, because we want to be in a culture that celebrates one another. We are made to be around in a culture that expresses gratitude. And I think it's an attitude that is blessed. I think it's an attitude that I'm grateful for gratitude. Somebody wants to know your marathon time goal. I think that's important. I think you should share that.
Oh man, guys, I may be over my head. The marathon I've chosen is a trail race, and it's got 3,500 feet of elevation gain. So I'm going for 6 hours, guys. If I finish it in 6 hours, I feel like I'm doing good. So.
That's a long day of running. Well, appreciate. Is there more on here, Kirk?
I think that's how often should leaders and teams check in on goals? I mean, I think every week. I think that's. Keep it in front of you every week, or it's just gonna fade away, in my experience.
Which takes me to that, back to the life hack that I shared, and just give you as homework is write down your goals, write down your gratitudes, put them in together in a note in your phone, and don't just review it weekly. Review it. Try to review it daily. It's a difficult discipline. Set some big goals in there. I think there was another question about how do you know, is it too big? Is it too small? Guess. Get started somehow, somewhere, get started, and then you're going to get better and better. If doctors can practice medicine, then we can practice setting goals for our lives. And so you're going to get better and better at it. How do you know that it's a good goal? Because you can do this with it. This whole webinar, you can make it actionable. You can break it down. You can put it into steps. You can put it on your calendar. You can involve others, assign roles, and you can measure the progress. So we'd love to continue to follow up with you. You can do that in the community, ArtSpeak Creative community. If you go to artspeakcreative.com, you can see links to all of this. If you go to artspeakcreative.com/consulting, we have opportunities to come alongside your entire organization. We love that. We've got a team out traveling today on the way back from Minneapolis. But we got several teams that do that, come alongside and help you mission, vision, values, goal setting, strategy. So if this is resonating deeply with you as an individual or you for your team, and we could ever be a resource, then we're all in.